everyone. So Hakeem threw me a bit of a curveball by including the history of money in his first talk, in his introduction to Bitcoin. So I'll have to introduce Bitcoin in my history of money. My name is Lui Smyth. I'm from UCL's anthropology department, and I'm going to give a talk tonight putting Bitcoin in context, hopefully slightly different from what you Bitcoin community is used to hearing. In one sense, it'll be more focused on the past, and in another sense that it'll be drawing on anthropology more than economics. Okay? So I'm going to start by talking about the two broad competing theories about where money in the original sense comes from. I'm then going to give a very quick history of money through the ages, and hopefully skipping over the parts that Hakeem has already done. And money in the sense of a means of exchange, a store of value, and a unit of account. And then I'm also going to suggest, or highlight rather, three alternative frameworks, conceptual frameworks of how we consider money. Okay, that is as a language, as a symbol, and as a form of collective memory. So the textbook story about the origins of money, and this was first articulated by Aristotle and then repeated by Adam Smith, was that early human societies used to barter, and as humans specialized, they had a surplus of a particular good, and they would use it to trade with their neighbor in exchange for something they needed. And the idea is you have some spare fish, and you go to your neighbor who has shoes, and you want shoes, and he wants fish, and you trade, you swap. Now, there's a dilemma here, and that dilemma is that you need to find that exact person, and that's called the double coincidence of wants. And that this inefficiency creates the conditions where a common commodity emerges that then becomes money. And you turn things into money. You swap your fish for sugar cane, and then you use the sugar cane to buy shoes from someone else. Now, the problem with this story is that there is no evidence to suggest it ever happened, and there's plenty of evidence to suggest it did not happen. And I'm drawing here on the work of anthropologist David Graeber a lot. Because when we look at primitive societies and we look at the archaeological anthropological record, what we find is not barter, but gift economy. So you're the fisherman and you have a surplus of fish. You don't go and try and barter for shoes. What actually happens is you just give it to your hungry neighbor. And when someone else has the shoes, you just ask them, can you have shoes? And they give you shoes. So this is still a form of exchange, because when you give your neighbor the fish, you get social status in return. You get, basically, he owes you one. And that can mean lots of things. And it can mean you build a social bond through that. And it might mean a reciprocal gift later down the line. It might not. That's not, besides the point.
Sorry.
And
Sorry.
yeah.
It's very quiet at the back.
Sorry. Okay.
Struggling a little bit. If you can.
Is that better?
That's it.
Sorry.
The mics are up full. So
Okay. Sorry.
Sorry.
Okay. So can everyone hear me? You missed the best bit. Okay. Okay, so I was describing gifting societies, gift economies. Okay, so in a society like this with constant gift giving, the result is that everyone is in debt to everyone, and that creates interdependence and it creates community cohesion. And the debts are kept track of in the most abstract and convoluted way, in that everyone remains friends. And you see this still today among the Tiv women of central Nigeria, where they will go around from house to house constantly giving each other gifts, and they will never, they'll never return with a gift of the exact same value, because to do so is to end the debt and implies that you are trying to end the social relationship. Okay, so you have just in fact the Adam Smith story of barter economies is only ever seen in societies that have money and then for some reason lose that money, usually political collapse of some kind. And so you need a market relations before you can have barter. So actually, you have credit, then money, then barter, not the other way around. So these two stories give you two senses of what money is. On the one hand, money, if money in barter is a commodity, it's something of value that you use in exchange. And money in a gift society is a debt or a credit, depending on whose point of view you're looking at. And this tension between money as credit and money as commodity comes up again and again in the history of money. And I mean, one anthropologist describes it as the two sides of a coin, the coin of money. On the one side, you've got the commodity, so the pound or the shekel or the dollar, which all originally refer to weights of a commodity. And on the other hand, you have the authority who you are trusting will pay you back. And it might be the queen, or it might be a god, or a map of Europe, depending on what you're looking at. Okay? So, now, that's the origins. I'm going to give you a super quick history of money, primordial myths. Very first exchange, not even before humans, not even between humans, was between humans and gods. So your gods are your best trading partners, and they're the easiest people to trade with. They're also the one people you want to have on side, and it's a lot easier to. I'm talking about sacrifices, obviously. So it's a lot easier to try and do a deal with a god than with a rival tribe that you don't know. Yeah. But the first money, in the sense that we maybe see it comes early civilizations in Mesopotamia. So you get both sides of the coin. You get money as a commodity. So people use barley in ancient Sumerian people, and they use barley as a means of account, a unit of account to manage the palace finances. And then you get the same in Egypt, ancient Egypt, where they use wheat to manage finance. So it's a unit of account, but it's also, you see money as credit, because they don't literally hand around the barley, they deal in promissory notes. In this case, they're cuneiform tablets, but they are notes saying who is owed what to whom. And in this case, it's actually from 3000 BC. It's on the allocation of beer, so it's a slightly different, probably an early driver in adoption of credit. Anyway, then the first early coinage comes Lydia in southern Turkey, around 700 BC. And it's made of electrum, which is a mixture of gold and silver. So you've the very early connection between what we call precious metals and money. And coins appear independently in China quite soon afterwards. And in fact, there's like a parallel history of money and everything going on in China through history. But I'm giving a very Eurocentric version of events. So from Alexander the Great onwards, the sovereign puts their faces on the coin by tradition. So he starts that, and it's a signal of power, and it can play against you, because if you move into Rome, when Caligula, the Roman emperor, dies, all the coins are reminted almost instantly to try and wipe away the memory of the leader. So it wasn't a guarantee of influence. As late as Charlemagne in like 800 CE. Roman coins are still circulating around Europe. So the coin does not necessarily need the issuing authority for it to maintain value. If there's a power vacuum, it can continue on even later. And there's also a Byzantine gold coin called the Byzant, which circulates widely in this period. Okay, skipping forward, during the Middle Ages, there's a shortage of coin in Europe. And in fact, by one account, the Crusaders, I think it's gone wrong. The Crusaders, one of the reasons they were trying to conquer the Holy Land was to get more precious metals. And then also... Well, they attacked plenty of Christian lands along the way, put it that way. So it was... Yeah, but we don't want to get bogged down in the Crusades. And then in the 13th century, you get Marco Polo, who comes back from China and amazes everyone with the stories that the Chinese leader has got people to accept the bark of trees made into something like paper as money. So the Chinese at this point have actually overtaken us. So anyway, the shortage of precious metal is alleviated very suddenly with the discovery of the New World. The Incas called silver the tears of the moon, and the gold was the sweat of the sun. But they didn't actually, it was a non-monetary society, so gold and silver were used for decorative purposes in the New World. Now, so Spain obviously gets all the booty in this case. But it's not the treasure that makes the big structural change to Europe. It's actually the precious metal deposits in the New World, especially silver, huge deposits of silver in Mexico and Bolivia, which is all shipped back to Spain. And that has a few effects. For one thing, it makes Spain initially very rich, though it later Spain has what we call a resource curse, that they stop investing in productive activity because they just have all this precious metals being shipped in. You also have you have the Spanish piece of 8 becomes the first global currency, and it doesn't last particularly long, but because it's too easy to melt down, it's in gold. But we have the first Spanish global currency, and then also you have the price revolution. So this is between the 1540s and 1640s, and across Europe, the price of food goes up, and this is a revelation. Now, actually looking back, it only went up by 2% per annum, so it's what we would call very low inflation. But at that time, it was a new phenomenon. So it changed things. So the next big developments are all in Northern Europe. In Amsterdam, you've got the developments of checks and direct debits. Later, the Swedish Riksbank is the first. Is the first to lend in excess of its metallic reserves. So this is the first fractional reserve lending, which I'm not going to get into, but that's. Yeah, so again, you've got the escalation from commodity money into credit money. And then in 1694, you got the Bank of England, which is responsible for a number of innovations. They had the first monopoly rights for issuing notes, and they formalized the gold standard, so it's very important. In the 1700s, we see some interesting experiments in... Oh, look, anyway. I think I'm dealing with an older version of this than it was intended. In 1700s, you see tobacco used in the American colonies, in Virginia, Maryland. We also see paper money used extensively. And paper money is very interesting because paper money is almost always associated with revolutions. So the colonies use it to become independent. Revolutionary France uses it when they overthrow the king. And then it's used later in Russia and China and places like that. So skipping through, there's the Napoleonic Wars and the coinage crisis in Britain caused by war debts and a shortage of silver. But after these hiccups, Britain has the gold standard, and the British sterling pound becomes the world currency. But it's backed by gold. And actually, Britain's ability to maintain the gold standard is almost like an index of British imperial power. We see this again later with the States, that if you have an empire or enough economic power, you can maintain your currency backed against gold. After World War II, the Bretton Woods Conference formally switches the world over to a dollar-based economy, away from sterling, and most countries peg their currencies to the dollar. The dollar is pegged to gold, so everyone is pegged to each other. And the gold is easier. Dollars are easier to hold than gold. So most people will most countries in the developing world accumulate dollars rather than gold. And then in 1971, Richard Nixon closes the gold window, and all of a sudden those dollars, they start a long descent in value, and gold does not. So that has been described as one of the largest transfers of wealth in history, from dollar-holding developing world nations to gold-holding United States. And it was one of the causes of the oil crisis. Anyway, that's a very quick transition of money. So, how do I get the... I'm going to need the the right version. I can just use it without the presentation. Try it. I think it's just another version.
Oh man, is that it?
Let's see. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So it's just, all it's extra is a picture of tobacco and a few other things. But I need it for this. Okay. So how else might we view money? So the first way I would argue is money as a language or a protocol. So I'm talking in the broadest sense of the word. Secondly, as a political and religious symbol, and thirdly, as a shared memory. So I'll explain these in each case. So money has been described as the symbol of all symbols, and in fact, the word symbol comes from the Greek symbolon, which was a metal disc which was broken in two, and one half was given to each side of a contract. So it was a sign of trust, and it was also it was a metal pledge. It was the commodity was present. So you always have this commodity and the credit. But it's political symbol. So we see this from when the sovereign's head is stamped on each coin from ancient Greece onwards, and it's one of the earliest forms of political propaganda. And today that propaganda takes the form of, sorry, I should be here, shouldn't I? High-tech imagery. This is the West African franc, and then you also see the same kind of high-tech imagery on the Canadian dollar. So the aspirations of a country are expressed through their money. And we can see political tensions played out when there are rival currencies in play. So after the Soviet Union collapsed, people embraced the US dollar as a complementary currency, and in doing so, they were embracing Western consumerism and the promise of riches. And later, as one anthropologist in Ukraine at the time described how when people reacted to the hryvnia, which was the new Ukrainian currency, with confusion, mistrust, and mockery, they were using it as a proxy for the shaky institutional foundations of those currencies. Money can be deeply entrenched in identity, and we see this with nationalism in Britain, where there's the save our pound, and we see this with dollar patriotism in the States. The Russian central bank has a competition to decide the symbol for the ruble, because this is seen as an essential part of any economic power, the identity, the symbol. And even the euro was part of a wider effort to build a European identity. And you see this with the fictional buildings and bridges that are on the notes. I don't know if you're aware of this, but on all euro notes that you have architecture which doesn't actually exist. So it's yeah. I mean, because you couldn't, no one would ever be able to agree on which bridge or which tower got to go on the 50 euro note. So I think it's a really nice indicator of the kind of the hollow political nature of the European Union, the lack of solidarity that exists there. So pictures of nowhere. I mean, yeah. So and remember, nowhere is Greek in Greek is utopia. So it's. So money is also a religious symbol. The Russian thinker Vasily Rozanov saw coinage as offering a metaphysical connection to the ancient civilization. And those ancient civilizations often feature gods and mythical figures on their coins. And there's evidence that Indian gods that made it onto a coin would last far longer than gods that did not make it onto a coin. So, but the god wasn't just on the coin; the god was the coin in one sense. You have moral panic in Russian villages when they remint coins, because these rural peasants don't really understand where the coin comes from or how it's made and why it has so much value, and they assume there's some kind of magic behind that, and they assume it is thus sacred in some way. So you have there have always been like religious connotations to money, especially in primitive societies. And then later, Karl Marx describes how money replaces God as our fetishized source of agency. So there's no question in my mind that Bitcoin is rich in symbolic value. I don't know if it's political or religious, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that later. Okay. So money is a memory. And to see what I'm saying here, let's go back to the village when you have the fish being handed from one neighbor to another, and you have the shoes going from one neighbor to another, and you have this constant debts being accumulated, and everyone's trying to keep track of who owes what to whom. And at some point, a society becomes so complex that you can't keep track of that anymore. And at that point, you start using a money. So money is your way of keeping track of who owes what to whom. And even now, even in a global society, money is a way of keeping track of our exchange with the rest of humanity, you might put it. And the word money itself actually comes from Juno Moneta, which was a Roman mint, and that was the same. That was the Roman equivalent of Mnemosyne, the Greek god of memory. So that's the basis of that. And then I think this is the memory analogy really comes into its own for Bitcoin, of course, because Bitcoin is just the materialized. It's just a dedicated file to the memory of all transactions. Okay. And finally, money as a language or a protocol. The structuralists, I don't know if you, there's a school of thought called structuralism, which says we can understand all of society and all of culture by seeing it as a language. And by that, we mean that every utterance and every instance is relates back to a set of invisible rules that we're not really aware of, and that those rules are language. And so money, in this sense, it's an agreed set of rules that we don't articulate, but we follow the rules. Anyway, and I threw it in there because I think it's quite nice that Bitcoin is literally a protocol, and so, but it is also comes from a strong tradition of being a protocol, or being like of money in general being a protocol. And one other thing I'd say about that is that just as the Lydians were minting the first coins, the Phoenicians were developing the first human alphabet. So at the very same time that we were codifying and standardizing how we keep track of human relations, we were doing the same with human thought. So, okay, so that's it. Okay, so to wrap up, we've seen that the materiality of money has changed from functional to decorative to representational. We've seen that the authority that is behind the money has changed from gods to rulers backed by gods, to rulers backed by electors, to technocrats backed by governments, backed by electors, and then maybe to community-led efforts such as Bitcoin. And there's lots of left out, obviously. One final piece of evidence I'd point out to just bring it all together, that money is based entirely on human relations, is that money has never been metricated, in the sense that we agreed that time would be measured in seconds, and second became a standard measure of time. We did the same with weight, where we said a kilo is a kilo and it's standard. A volt is a volt and it's standard. There will never be an equivalent standard measure of monetary value, and there can never be because it is built entirely on human relations. So I'm happy to take any questions or especially comments. Okay, thank you.
Is that microphone work?
Yeah.
Just pass that round for questions.
Does that work? No.
No, it's not.
Does that work? Does that work? Does that work? No. We'll just share the mic.
No. Just take the questions.
Okay.
Thanks, Ray. So, if we take money to present body society days, or if we accumulate money as debt or as credit, and you describe money as a language or political symbol, religious symbol, or as a memory, let's take money as actually the medium or the message that we exchange between ourselves. Nowadays, I mean, you quoted Marx, but nowadays some people in our society look at money as God, or they perceive money as God. That being said, what do you think is the greatest quality of people in our society?
I missed the very end. So what?
Greatest quality of Bitcoin.
Nowadays, so if people look at money as God nowadays, and they perceive it as God,
Yeah.
without quoting Marx or anything, what do you think is the greatest quality of Bitcoin in our society?
Okay. I think the greatest quality of Bitcoin is that it doesn't have to be the only instance of its kind. So other currencies, they because of where they get their authority, so there can only be one US dollar. Because of the material they are, there can only be gold, they form a monopoly over money. Whereas with Bitcoin, you have a whole new genre of currency that is open to competition. And competition in every sphere is healthy, and I think in money, it's also healthy.
I've got a question. Since we started with, gift economies, do you think we'll ever close the loop and go back to gift economies?
Yeah, well, it's not a completely unorthodox view. There's a French thinker called Jean Baudrillard who was obsessed with humans and in the very postmodern sense. He was obsessed with virtual worlds. He was obsessed with advertising. He was obsessed with what we have become. And he talked about gift economy as a kind of escape from. You see, a gift economy occurs in a state of abundance. So if you are a small clan of people living, you might not have, in a jungle or in your hunter-gatherers, you might not have great life expectancy, but you are not likely to experience shortage. And that allows a gift economy to occur. So are we reaching the point where we would again have the abundance necessary for a gift economy? Sure. Why not?